What if I told you that these are the most hated figures in reggae music? From Joe Gibbs, who faced a massive lawsuit for unpaid royalties and errors in songwriting credits, leading to the closure of his studio, to Veb's Cartel, whose lyrics led to his songs being banned from several countries. Here are the 10 most hated figures in reggae music. Clement Dodd, Coxsone. Dodd. CD was a Jamaican record producer who was influential in the development of ska and reggae in the 1950s, 1960s, and beyond. In 1954, back in Jamaica, he set up the Downbeat sound system, being the owner of an amplifier, a turntable, and some U.S. records, which he would import from New Orleans and Miami. With some U.S. records in hand, he started the Downbeat sound system in 1954, setting up speakers on the streets and throwing parties that lit up the neighborhoods. Jamaica didn't have much in terms of recorded music back then, so Dodd made trips to the U.S. to bring back fresh songs that no one else had. While he was away, his mother, Doris Darlington, held things down, spinning records and keeping the sound system alive. Over time, Dodd launched 5 different sound systems across Kingston, each playing every night. In 1963, Dodd founded what would become one of Jamaica's most iconic studios, Studio One. Artists like Bob Marley and the Wailers, Alton Ellis, Burning Spear, the Heptones, Dennis Brown, and many more all started there. Studio One was like a school for reggae and ska, a place where raw talent was shaped into music that would echo across the world. And to help run them, he brought in talented young men who would later become legends like Lee Scratch Perry, U-Roy, and Prince Buster. Perry was his right-hand man for years, until 1966, when he finally walked away, saying he'd been disrespected. That was just one of many cracks that would later show in Dodd's image. Despite all the classic songs recorded in Studio One, many of the musicians who made them barely earned a cent. According to singer Marcia Griffiths, back in those days, working at Studio One was like a full-time job with no pay. She said, "No money came with it. We'd be in the studio all day recording. No money, maybe we'd get one patty for lunch. Even performing live shows didn't bring them anything." Today, among reggae insiders and music historians, Coxsone Dodd is one of the most hated names in the business. Some say he robbed artists of their dues. Others accuse him of hoarding credits and royalties that should have gone to the singers and musicians who built the genre from scratch. Chris Blackwell. Christopher Blackwell was a young man with a big dream when he started Island Records in Jamaica in 1959. He was just 22 years old and full of ambition. At a time when few people outside the island cared about ska and reggae, Blackwell was one of the first to record and promote Jamaican music. When he moved back to England in 1962, he sold records straight from the back of his car, mostly to the Jamaican community living in London. Slowly but surely, Island Records grew. People started to recognize the label for discovering powerful music and bold new artists. In 1972, the Wailers, Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and Bunny Wailer were trying to collect unpaid royalties for songs Chris Blackwell had already been distributing. They reached out to him, asking for a meeting. Blackwell hadn't even seen them perform yet, but he believed in their potential. So, without signing any contract, he gave them £4,000 to record a new album. That album would become Catch a Fire, one of reggae's most important records. At the time, Jimmy Cliff had just left Island Records, and Blackwell needed a new face for reggae music. The Wailers, who were desperate, were more than ready to take that place. Back in Kingston, they recorded the album at Harry J's studio. This was the first time a reggae group was treated like a rock band with real studio time, professional production, and serious promotion. The album had songs like 400 Years and Stop That Train. Peter Tosh led those tracks, pouring his heart out about injustice and truth. Peter believed in standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. That's what made him special and difficult to control. After Catch a Fire, the Wailers dropped another album, Burnin'. It was powerful and bold, featuring Get Up, Stand Up, a worldwide anthem for human rights. But that album would be the last with the original Wailers together. By 1974, the group had started falling apart. Bunny Wailer was the first to walk away. He clashed with Chris Blackwell over money, especially after not being paid for their UK shows. Peter Tosh wasn't far behind. He was furious that Island refused to release his solo album. He felt Blackwell was playing favorites, giving Bob Marley more support, more money, and more power. To Peter, it felt like betrayal. He had written or co-written some of their biggest songs like 400 Years, Get Up, Stand Up, and No Sympathy. But it was Bob who got the spotlight. And when Blackwell started releasing albums as Bob Marley and the Wailers, that was the final straw. Peter didn't keep his anger a secret. He mocked Chris Blackwell openly, calling him Chris Whitewurst instead of Blackwell. In interviews, he showed nothing but disgust for the man. He once asked sarcastically, "What was well with him? So me call him every time me see him. What happened, Whitewell? What happened, Blackwell?" And that's how the story flipped. At first, Chris Blackwell was praised for helping reggae break into the global scene. But over time, many people started to see a different side. Behind the fame, behind the money, there was bitterness and betrayal. To some, Blackwell is remembered as the man who opened doors. But to others, especially inside the reggae world, he became one of the most hated figures in the music's history. Artists said he took too much credit, used their voices, then tossed them aside. Duke Reid. Before Duke Reid became one of the most feared and hated men in reggae music, Duke Reid was just another guy trying to make his name in Kingston's fast-growing music scene. Back in 1953, he started out with a sound system. At the time, these sound systems were everything in Jamaica. Reid's quickly rose to the top, even beating out big names like Tom the Great Sebastian. By the late 1950s, Duke Reid wasn't just playing other people's music, he was making his own. At first, he had to rent other people's studios, but when his family moved their business to Bond Street, he built a recording studio above the store. That was the start of something big. He launched record labels like Treasure Isle and Duchess and started cutting deals with UK companies who wanted Jamaican music. Money started coming in, and so did the power. Duke Reid wasn't just a producer, he was an ex-policeman who never really stopped acting like one. He was known to walk into the studio with guns strapped to his waist and a rifle slung over his shoulder. Some days, if a song sounded good to him, he'd fire a few celebratory shots into the air. Other times, if he didn't like what he heard, the tension in the room could make even the boldest singer freeze. Musicians often felt trapped in his sessions. Derek Morgan, one of Jamaica's most famous singers, said there were times Reid would wave or fire his gun just to make a point. You weren't just singing in front of a producer, you were performing under the threat of violence. The payment system was even worse. Back then, Jamaican artists were barely paid at all. Drummer Aston Henry remembered getting just 5 shillings per track. Even as the music got popular in Britain and started making real money, the people playing the instruments and writing the songs were left behind. Duke Reid made sure he got the credit and the money. Jamaica didn't have strong copyright laws in those days, so producers like Reid could slap their names on songs they didn't write and collect royalties that should have gone to the musicians. Even when he paid them, he played mind games. Derek Harriott remembered getting paid £30 after a recording session. But instead of handing him a few large bills, Reid gave him stacks of 5-shilling notes, making the payment look bigger than it really was. It was a trick, a way to make young artists feel like they were getting a big break, even if they were being shortchanged. Harriott and his friends were smart enough to see through it, but they were young. They knew they were being used, but they stayed quiet for the music, for the dream. And so, while Duke Reid is often remembered for helping shape ska and rocksteady, the truth is a lot uglier. Ask anyone who came up in that era, and they'll tell you the same thing. Duke Reid was a bully in a business suit. He ruled his studio like a king, made millions off the backs of underpaid musicians, and left behind a legacy of fear and betrayal. Shaba Ranks. Back in the late 1980s and early 1990s, there weren't many names bigger in dancehall than Shaba Ranks. He had a deep, powerful voice that demanded attention, and a kind of raw energy that made him stand out wherever he went. In Jamaica, he was already a star. But by 1990, the rest of the world started to notice too, especially after he released his album, Just Reality. Soon after, he dropped 2 back-to-back albums, As Raw as Ever and Extra Naked. Both were hits, both won Grammy Awards for Best Reggae Album in 1992 and 1993, and just like that, Shaba Ranks became an international name. You could hear his music blasting in clubs in New York, London, Kingston, everywhere. One of the biggest problems people had with Shaba wasn't about his music, it was about his views, especially when it came to the gay community. Like many dancehall artists at the time, some of his lyrics were seen as violent and hateful toward gay people. In one of his early songs from 1990, Wicked in a Bed, there were lines that openly talked about violence against gay men. In 1992, Shaba appeared on a British music TV show called The Word. During the interview, the host asked him what he thought about Boom Bye Bye, a well-known but very controversial song. Shaba didn't hold back. Holding a Bible in his hand, he said the Word of God supports the idea of crucifying homosexuals. He tried to soften it by saying he believed in freedom of speech and progress for Jamaicans, but the damage was already done. People were shocked. Some were furious. The host, Mark Lamar, didn't hesitate. He told Shaba straight to his face, "That's absolute crap and you know it." After that, things started falling apart. He was removed from a concert lineup with Bobby Brown. His record label, Sony Music, distanced itself from him. Radio stations, promoters, fans all began to turn their backs. Shaba did issue an apology, but by then, the public had already made up its mind. Today, many in the music world avoid him, not just because of the controversy, but also because of how he now handles business. He wants full ownership of his masters. According to Shaba, many of the same producers and label owners who once praised him now avoid him. Vybz Kartel. Vybz Kartel is one of the most famous and most controversial figures in Jamaican dancehall music. From the moment he stepped into the spotlight, he was shaking things up. With sharp lyrics, bold topics, and a wild public image, Kartel has always made people talk. Rolling Stone once said he had folk hero status in Jamaica. He pushed boundaries in ways few artists ever dared to, whether it was singing about taboo topics like oral sex or throwing jabs at fellow dancehall stars. Some called him a genius, others were shocked by him. But either way, people were paying attention. In 2004, his rising fame hit a wall. His nomination for the UK MOBO Awards was pulled after people protested the violent and homophobic lyrics in his songs. 6 years later, he seemed to change course, signing the Reggae Compassionate Act, a pledge by some artists to stop promoting hate in their music. Kartel also had a knack for starting drama. In 2006, he left a major dancehall crew called The Alliance, and soon, a public feud exploded between him and fellow artist Mavado. They traded insults in one diss track after another, and the beef didn't just stay in the music. Young fans picked sides, Team Gaza for Kartel, Team Gully for Mavado, and sometimes it turned violent in real life. Even though both artists publicly called for peace in 2007, things heated up again just a year later. Their on-stage battle at the famous Sting concert in 2008 left the crowd divided. By 2009, their feud had taken over dancehall culture. The music, the news, the streets, everything was Gaza versus Gully. It got so serious that Jamaica's prime minister had to step in and bring them together for a peace talk. Then came even more bans. In 2011, the government in Guyana took Vybz Kartel off the air entirely. They said his music was obscene and offered nothing positive to the country's culture. It was the first time Guyana had banned an artist like that. Some Jamaicans admire him for saying what others wouldn't. Others say he helped drag dancehall into darker territory. Even university professors have weighed in, saying Kartel's legacy divides the country. People either love him or deeply hate him. Vybz Kartel is one of the most hated figures in reggae music. To his critics, he represents everything wrong with modern dancehall, too violent and too reckless. If you are enjoying this video, appreciate it by giving it a thumbs up, and if you have not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button. Joe Gibbs. Joe Gibbs was a Jamaican reggae producer. He moved to Kingston, Jamaica, and opened a place to fix TVs on Beeston Street. But while his main job was fixing electronics, something else was happening. He began selling music records on the side. That small change ended up shaping his entire life. The Jamaican music scene was booming in the 1960s, and Joe saw a chance to be part of it. By 1966, he was recording songs in the back of his repair shop using a simple 2-track machine. He worked closely with Lee Scratch Perry, who had just broken ties with another big name in the business, Clement Dodd. With help from Bunny Lee, Joe launched his own label, Amalgamated Records. It didn't take long for him to find success. Roy Shirley's song, Hold Them, one of the earliest rocksteady hits, shot to the top of the Jamaican charts. Over the years, Joe Gibbs worked with some of the biggest names in reggae, including Culture, Barris Hammond, Gregory Isaacs, the Heptones, and many more. His studio became a hotspot for talent, and he helped shape the sound of a generation. If you were into reggae, you knew his name. But behind the music, there was trouble. Artists started speaking up about the bad treatment they passed through working with Gibbs. Some said they never got paid properly. Others said he made promises he didn't keep. Reggae star Max Romeo took things a step further. He filed a lawsuit against major labels, claiming that music he recorded with Gibbs in the 1970s had been used in movies, games, and sampled by other artists, but he hadn't seen a single dollar in royalties. And he wasn't alone. Many artists shared stories of chasing after payments, only for Joe Gibbs to vanish when it was time to settle up. In the mid-1980s, Joe Gibbs did something that would ruin his reputation for good. J.C. Lodge released a cover of Someone Loves You Honey, and it became a massive hit. But Gibbs made the bold move of putting his own name as the songwriter, even though the real writer was Don Devaney. Once Devaney found out, he went after him in court. The success of Lodge's version triggered a massive lawsuit for unpaid royalties and errors in songwriting credits, leading to the closure of his studio. This catastrophic event disrupted his productions, stalling his career. He left the music business and started running a grocery store to make a living. He tried to come back in the 1990s by teaming up with old friends like Errol Thompson and Luddy Crooks. They made new music, and Gibbs stayed involved in the industry into the 2000s. But things were never the same again. Because by that point, Joe Gibbs had become one of the most hated figures in reggae music. Artists saw him as a man who used their talent, made money off their work, and left them behind. Peter Tosh. Peter Tosh was a Jamaican reggae musician. He became one of the founding members of the Wailers, alongside Bob Marley and Bunny Wailer. Together, they helped create the sound that would take reggae around the world. After the Wailers split in the mid-1970s, Peter went solo. That's when he recorded his first solo album, Legalize It. The album was more than just music. Peter believed that marijuana should be legal, and he wasn't afraid to say it out loud. When the song Legalize It came out, it caused an uproar in Jamaica. The government banned it from the radio. But Peter didn't go quiet. Instead, he went louder. He printed the entire lyrics in a full-page newspaper ad so no one could ignore what he was saying. The band didn't stop him. In fact, it gave him more attention. More people started listening, not just to the music, but to the message behind it. Then the British government tried to shut him up too. Radio stations were told not to play the song. Ads for the album were pulled. However, when Legalize It finally dropped in the US in 1976, it made it to the Billboard 200. That was a big deal for a Jamaican artist pushing such a controversial message. One of Peter's most iconic moments came at a peace concert meant to unite Jamaica during a time of political violence. Big names like Bob Marley were there, and so was Peter Tosh. But while others sang about unity, Peter used the mic to throw fire. He stood on stage, looked the Prime Minister in the eye, and called out the entire political system, calling it shit stem. He said, "We can't make the little pirate Dem come here and rob up the resources for the country. I am not a politician, but I suffer the consequences." Just months after that powerful speech, Peter was arrested for smoking herb in public. While in police custody, he was beaten so badly they broke his hand and busted his head open. It wasn't the first time the system tried to break him, but even with blood on his face and stitches in his scalp, he still wouldn't back down. Peter Tosh became one of the most hated figures in reggae music, not because of his music, but because of what he stood for. The Jamaican government couldn't control him. Politicians were scared of what he might say next. His outspokenness and his refusal to stay silent made him a threat to the people in power. When was killed, many believed it wasn't just a robbery gone wrong. Rumors started going around that the government was behind it. Beanie Man. Beanie Man is a Jamaican dancehall DJ. From the time he was 5 years old, he was already grabbing the mic and performing. His uncle, Sidney Knowles, who once played drums for reggae legend Jimmy Cliff, helped guide him in those early years. By 1981, Beanie recorded his very first song, Too Fancy, and 2 years later, he released his debut album, The Invincible Beanie Man, the 10-year-old DJ wonder. At just 10 years old, he was already being mentioned alongside big names like Dillinger and Fathead. As a teenager, Beanie kept performing and sharpening his skills, often going head-to-head with dancehall heavyweights like Ninja Man, Admiral Bailey, and Shaba Ranks. He spent his early career recording at Shocking Vibes Studio. Things changed in 1992 when he lit up the stage at Reggae Sunsplash. That performance helped push him into the spotlight. In 1993, he dropped his first #1 single in Jamaica, Maddie, and won DJ of the Year. He didn't stop there, he won that award 8 years in a row. Around this time, a fierce rivalry with fellow DJ Bounty Killer also began. Eventually, they settled things with a live sound clash, but their tension had already made history. As Beanie Man's fame grew, so did the criticism. Some of his lyrics were called out for promoting violence against gay people. Activists and human rights groups began raising concerns, especially as his music spread to bigger audiences outside Jamaica. In 2004, he was removed from the MTV Video Music Awards after protests by gay rights activists. That same year, UK authorities stopped him at Heathrow Airport after one of his concerts was cancelled. His label released an apology on his behalf. In 2005, a group called Outrage said they would stop protesting Beanie after he agreed not to perform those songs anymore, and he was even allowed to perform in London again. But the story didn't end there. In 2006, Beanie Man claimed that his lyrics weren't aimed at gay people, but were actually against child abuse. In 2007, reports said he had signed the Reggae Compassionate Act, promising to never perform anti-gay songs again. But then, he denied signing it. It was like every time he apologized, he would later say he didn't mean it, or that people misunderstood him. In 2012, he once again tried to clear things up. In a public statement, he said, "Let me make this clear and straight. I have nothing against no one, regardless of which sexual preference you are, including gays and lesbian people. I respect all humans." But even that didn't last. In later interviews, he went back to saying things like, "I never apologized," and accused others of not understanding his culture. When a New Zealand news site tried to ask him about it, before a concert in 2015, he hung up the phone. Today, Beanie Man still performs and still has a loyal fan base. But no matter how big his legacy might be in dancehall music, there's another side to his story that many will never forget. Among critics, human rights groups, and parts of the global reggae audience, Beanie Man is one of the most hated figures in reggae music. Some people see him as a musical genius, but many others see him as someone who used his platform to spread hate. Mr. Vegas. Mr. Vegas is one of Jamaica's well-known dancehall musicians. Back in 1998, his voice was everywhere. His songs like You Sure, Jack It Up, and Latest News had people dancing in the streets. However, in more recent years, Mr. Vegas turned from hitmaker to headline maker for all the wrong reasons. Once, Mr. Vegas tried to present himself as the peacemaker. He posted a photo of Alkaline, Masika, and Skillabeng, and wrote captions like, "Hate is a disease, love is winning." But that message didn't land the way he hoped. Instead of applause, he got backlash. People flooded his comments calling him a hypocrite. They reminded him of all the times he had torn others down, of the years he spent throwing shade, starting feuds, and taking shots at fellow artists. And then Bounty Killer himself clapped back, calling out Mr. Vegas publicly and accusing him of being fake, someone who plays innocent but thrives off drama. That wasn't the only time Mr. Vegas stirred trouble. Over the years, he's gone after a long list of artists. In 2016, he recorded diss tracks aimed at Popcan and even international star Drake. He feuded with I-Octane and Red Rat. He even mocked Lady Saul after she gave her life to Christ, going so far as to hold a mock funeral for her in 2020. And it didn't stop there. He's continued to clash with artists like Hawkeye, Tyracle, and even former cricketer-turned-dancehall singer Marlon Samuels. Because of these actions, Mr. Vegas went from being a respected artist to one of the most hated figures in reggae and dancehall. While some fans still defend him, A large part of the reggae and dancehall has deep hatred for Mr. Vegas. Edward Sega. Edward Sega was a Jamaican politician and record producer. Long before he entered politics, Sega was already making moves in Jamaican culture. In the 1950s, he took an interest in the island's music, especially the traditional sounds of the people. He recorded folk songs, worked with upcoming artists like Higgs and Wilson, and even started a record label, West Indies Records Limited. It was a big deal back then, and it grew into the most successful record company in the region. Sega helped shine a light on Jamaica's musical talent at a time when the rest of the world wasn't paying attention. Later, he sold the company to Byron Lee, who renamed it Dynamic Sounds. Even though Edward Sega's legacy is not remembered for music alone, he remains one of the most hated figures associated with reggae music. In 1962, he became the leader of the Jamaica Labour Party, and later served as Prime Minister from 1980 to 1989. He also led the party for over 30 years, making him one of the longest-serving politicians in Jamaican history. Many people in Jamaica didn't just dislike Edward Sega, they feared and hated him. He was closely tied to Tivoli Gardens, a community in West Kingston known for poverty and criminal violence. Aside from that, Sega's economic policies centered around free market reforms were seen by many as heartless. His government privatized key industries and opened up the Jamaican economy to foreign control. But instead of lifting people out of poverty, it made things worse. Unemployment rose. The cost of living soared. While the rich got richer, the poor got poorer. His style of leadership didn't help either. He was called cold, disconnected, and authoritarian. He ruled with an iron fist, out of touch with the daily struggles of ordinary Jamaicans. Today, Edward Sega's legacy is complicated. Some admire him for helping shape Jamaica's music and culture. Others remember for the pain, bloodshed, and division that came with his name. Do you think their hate is justified? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest content.